Some more in speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Yeah, those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable senior network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com. At Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Bridgton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is.
Very dangerous. Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please
What?
come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Hello, good day, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is Researchers on a Mission Radio. I'm your host, Joe Kiernan. We have Tim C., the producer of the show, is joining us tonight. How are you, Tim?
Very good. How about yourself, Joe?
Doing very well. I'm glad everyone has joined us from watching the Super Bowl. I'm sure everyone's pouring in right now. It was a wonderful game from what I see, Tim.
Yeah, well, I didn't have money on either one of these guys, so.
Right on. Well, you know, what we're going to get into tonight, folks, is we have an easy night. We know it was a busy day for everyone. We didn't plan any particular guests for this evening, but what Tim and I have been meaning to do is every now and again we like to catch up on the latest news in the science world, latest history discoveries, scientific discoveries, a lot of breakthroughs in research. You know, more often than not, research is seldom rewarded in the sense that if you're unable to correlate the discoveries from different fields, it really won't help you at what you're looking into. You really have to take a look at everything that's going on, and it's usually the darndest places you find the answers for what you're looking for. You just have to be open-minded and take a look at the whole big picture. So, Tim, we were talking about some interesting topics that, as of late, have just been really cool things. Like, I was really, really impressed about how the Chinese government released how they had captured ball lightning that they had captured on video in high-speed video. And, that was just wild, man. They said that they can definitely confirm that it happens. It's a natural phenomenon. These balls of lightning are really just glowing spheres, and it says they even can range from 0.4 inches to 39 inches, which is rather odd that they can measure it. Really don't think it's really a controlled environment when it's naturally from one video. But however, they also say that the colors that these orbs can be, Tim, are white, yellow, red, orange, purple, green, and could last just a few seconds or a few minutes. And they mostly appear, obviously, with thunderstorms, but not always. And they usually hover near the ground and drift over the Earth at a few miles an hour. And it's also been seen on ships and even within airplanes.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna bring that.
What do you make of that? Especially the last two comments that it's been it's been noted on cruise ships specifically, and within airplanes, a fuselage of airplanes.
Well, I mean, my knowledge of lightning in general is it's static. So wherever there's static, it could appear. But the fact that what was really interesting to me when I read about the airplane incident is that it traveled through the cockpit of the airplane. Did you read that?
Yeah.
Yeah, bizarre. Now, of course, it's conductive because it's electricity, but I don't think there was any damage done to the aircraft at the time. It just passed right through.
Right, but it's just, to me, it's so incredible that it could actually take a form, a shape, but it really doesn't leave a physical impact. Like, how could it? I would imagine if it was nearby me, I would be in danger.
Sure.
If we're talking about lightning, that somehow is controlled in a little ball.
Right.
I would imagine this thing would be highly dangerous. This is what the laws of physics tell me. I certainly wouldn't want to be anywhere near it. So it's really incredible. I even read an account where a guy said during a storm in his hotel that a ball of lightning came right through the wall and was just in his hotel room. And
you know what? It's so hard to tell with lightning because I've witnessed lightning fly right in front of my car as I was driving on the highway once, and it just was a flash of light. But I've spoken to firemen, one fireman in particular. He told me an account back in the 90s when he was putting out a fire during a lightning storm, and a bolt of lightning came down. He looked right up, and he told me it looked like a ball of fire coming at him, directly at him, and it just missed him. But that's how he described it to me. Those were the words that he used. That always stuck with me. Lightning is it's nature's fury. What do you? It's
impressive though. I'm fascinated with lightning. I'm fascinated with it. Obviously, I've wandered way too close sometimes. I don't chase storms, as you know. I'm not in the interest of doing that. But I think lightning is absolutely fantastic. It's too bad such devastation is caused by it. But I think the phenomenon itself, and especially if I was referring to like a singular storm cell, where a little storm system's coming through and the temperature drops 20 degrees and you really feel a storm coming, and it's pretty cool, man. I really enjoy that kind of stuff. It's that seeing nature right in front of it's Mother Nature just passing by for a minute.
It's funny that feeling that you do get when you can tell that the pressure's dropping, and the leaves start to change, but something in you tells you there's danger of some sort coming. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And then, that's our, in my opinion, that's our last hint of what we actually have close to nature. That instinct, that primal instinct that animals still have, the wild, instincts.
Right.
We still have a little of it in us somewhere.
Well, if I can segue to, apparently we do have some of that in us, because reports are telling us that we have a percentage of Neanderthal genes in our DNA, every single one of us.
Right.
Do you remember what 2%?
1 to 2% from what I understand.
1 to 2%.
Right. And I think there was an article I read. I think it was LifeScience.com. Great website. But apparently there's a huge chance any humans that were born or came from anywhere outside of Africa have a 1 to 2% chance of having Neanderthal. I think it was something along those lines in their DNA, and that stems back 20 to 40,000 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, and now what it was saying was, if each one of us had 2% of this DNA in us, let's say, figuratively speaking, Tim, with myself and you, if you had 2% of this Neanderthal DNA in you, and I also had 2%, it doesn't mean that's the same 2% of our genetic structures. So what it's suggesting is, if you and I were put together genetically, scientifically speaking, they 4% of their genome structure for their DNA. So the big suggestion was that collectively they feel it's a fair estimate to say that existing within the humans today, there's 60 to 70% of Neanderthal DNA still at hand, still available for study in hopes. So it's pretty cool when you think of it like that. That maybe one day they could have this 70%, and it's interesting, but what are they supposed to do with it, right?
Well, it just explains all of my primal urges, my in my own life. Just thinking about my faults, not that being Neanderthal is a fault.
Now, don't take this genetic study for excuses, now, Tim.
Right.
Let's not think Neanderthal like now. But I thought it was pretty interesting, the fact that they think, even if they thought 50%, even if they thought the original Neanderthal DNA, 50% of that still could exist today. I find that interesting. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, what's more interesting is that all those thousands of years ago, our human ancestors were breeding with the Neanderthals, and I from what I've seen in photos, they don't look too attractive. So I would tend to think that maybe the men saw our women, or at least I like to think that they saw our women and said, "Yeah, I gotta have some of that."
Well, it might be the case, because it did say that it appears there's at least 300 separate sexual interactions between Neanderthals and modern day human. So they feel at least 300 separate times there's a mark on the DNA. So that's quite a bit. That's quite a bit.
It's either one crazy weekend or it happened over a period of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe weekends were measured a period of time at this period, at this year. But there was also the Nutcracker man who apparently ate tiger nuts was breaking news from 2.4 million years ago in East Africa. It was an amazing discovery.
I guess they called him the Nutcracker Man because he had a jaw like a nutcracker, and the fact that he was eating tiger nuts was great. I love it when they put those little blurbs in there. And
I also understand all they found was the jawbone. So
right.
They might have been using it for a nutcracker when it was discovered. I will research this deeper.
Yeah.
Well, there's also a 300,000-year-old campfire that was found in Israel, and it was pretty cool because it was a little village, and the camp. What was it? The same. It was the carbon details that were left there showed what they were eating and what they were baking, and it appeared that they were making some sorts of ceramics, and it appeared they were civilized nonetheless. It appears that it wasn't just cave dwelling who figured out fire, and it showed a civilization of some sort, a family structure or communal structure 300,000 years ago with a controlled campfire. And, this puts the use of fire much farther back now. This puts it 300,000 years ago.
Well, you know what interested me about that story was the fact that it was before the rise of Homo sapiens in Africa. So that basically means that they were, in Israel, in that area, before Africa. I mean, the Great Rift Valley is supposedly where we were originated from. So there obviously was some migration at that time.
Well,
you there, Joe?
It's really appeared that all through Europe and Siberia, there was a lot of big markers in the genetic line, and it's really coming out these days. They're really putting general areas to certain genes, and I find it pretty cool how they're able to do all of this and to market with certainty. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. Like Stephen Hawking's latest theory, which is I just will never quite understand it, and I don't think many people are really meant to understand it. At least that's what I tell myself.
I do my best with
it. It makes me feel better when I tell myself that. But
honestly, the only thing I felt good about Stephen Hawking is when he was proven wrong about one of his theories. That's the only time I've ever felt good, because he
won't admit to that. Yeah, and he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. He holds a sacred scientific position that even Isaac Newton has held. And he's got a good point though, but I'm just not too sure what the point really is, because it's just saying essentially when black holes, what we know of black holes is an all-consuming entity where it consumes all mass, matter, and light. And Hawkins is proposing that light actually survives it. Light actually passes through, which is astonishing, because how could it be if all matter is consumed? But it appears that it just doesn't begin or doesn't end.
Here's what I don't understand about this. I'm not going to say that. Okay, I am by no means an expert here, but what I will say is this: from what I gathered, is that he's saying that black holes don't exist. In general, they don't exist. However, if they don't, how could matter can go through? Understood. All right. Light isn't considered matter in that sense, from what I understand. But light can be bent by gravity, correct?
This is correct, yes.
So, if black holes use gravity to pull in matter, why would the light be able to just come through and just pass through? That's what I don't understand.
It's quantum physics, and I'm using that as an excuse. So, okay, quantum physics. It's really just tough to grasp. It's hard to visualize the linear fields that we call space and time, which is we had discussed. It's always a very difficult thing because we're so used to judging things by time, where we think time comes first. Yet time is just a way to explain the light that evolves in our world. The same amount of seconds in a year is the same amount of positions the Earth will go around the sun in a year. It's divinely calculated, they would say. It's supposed to be accurate as can be. And this has been going on for ages. But why would all of these DNA releases lately, Tim, why all of a sudden so many genetic pushings? Do you think that we're going to see a turn in the science world here in the United States?
I watched it for a second, Joe.
Do you think that we're going to be seeing, with all these recent findings in the DNA lineages and origins, do you think that we're going to see a lot more of pioneering DNA renegades, per se? You think that we're going to see a larger collection? Because I know some states are already with certain criminal acts, you have to put your DNA on file, and there's a lot of suggestions that there's a DNA collection.
My take on that is this.
Because I said this stuff was cool. Like, I'm finding these DNA studies really cool. So much so that I would want to be part of a DNA test? No, but maybe someone else would.
Well, here's what I think. And this is the problem that needs to be addressed before it goes any further, in my opinion. There are local law enforcement, and I can't remember what parts of the country it's scattered, but reports have come in over the past several months where even just a regular police traffic stop, they're asking people to give a swab.
Well, I know what happened in Alabama about 2 months ago, and I don't think that was the first time there. It was like a traffic, like a police check that you would go through, and really they were just asking people if they wanted to volunteer or be a part of the state study.
Well, that's different. If they ask that, that's not a problem. But I've read accounts where people were told they had to.
Yeah.
And how much validity there is to that, it obviously is.
Yeah, well, I too have heard a lot of what I would consider violations, really, things, petty crimes where people have to. One of the penalties is register their DNA, and it's just I think that might be quite offensive if I had to consider. Well, I guess honestly, it's not even considering.
if I was in that position, if I was ever in that position, I would decline. I'd say no, I'm not doing it, and arrest me, go right ahead. And I would probably be,
even if you had to, even if they said you had to.
Yeah, no, there's no way I would. Definitely not, because that's an invasion of my privacy. I don't feel they probably have my DNA on file somewhere anyway, but still, I'm not going to feed. I'm not giving it to them.
You just asked part one of do I have Neanderthal genes test.
Well, look,
I like your resistance, my friend.
no, I mean that's the way I am, and that's probably from years and years of paranoia that's been built into my brain.
No, it's not just you. It's not just you, and I'm not trying to strike a chord with you at all. I happen to agree. I think it's absolute nonsense. But again, I think a lot of being told anything is nonsense. I think it should be somewhat of a discussion. I don't.
Free society.
If you're told it has to be done, you really have to make a valid explanation why. You really just can't make people do things that they feel really violate themselves. Never mind our Declaration and Constitution in this country. You know, these
Well, look,
they really don't pertain to these things. But I'm trying not to go there.
Now that you hit me with that end,
all right,
I'm gonna go back over.
I will honor that.
I'm gonna say this. I agree with you that yes, there is definitely a need for it. For research, I think that look, stem cell research, all these things. There's a ton of work being done in that area. As far as,
but there's a lot of shady parts of stem cell research. It's.
Here's the thing.
I think, like a lot of things, people don't want to see these things. It's really. I think we're just going to reach the point on when we really don't care. We're numb to it.
Well, here's how I feel. I feel that there's good and bad that comes out of just about every single thing that either the private sector or the public sector puts out there. Private, I mean, corporations going out and doing their research and whatnot, and then of course the Big Brother, that whole aspect of it. But I think there's a need for research and development, for medicines, look at how far we've come in cancer research because of, I think we touched on this last week. The farther you go into our cellular structure and to find out the ways that the body does work, the more you find out on how to fix it, really. Reverse engineering.
Yeah. Well, I think most of it is reverse engineering. I think most of our successes, more often than not, we're presented the problem more. We're presented a problem that needs fixing. But I think lately we're creating a lot of problems that we're just unable to fix. I think we made a swap somewhere. And I think we're kind of all messed up right now.
Well, that's just because of abuse of power. That's my that's what I think. That's my own opinion. You can't give too small number of people too much power. That's an old.
Are you suggesting people naturally have a problem with hoarding power? Because I'd have to agree with you.
History will definitely say that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely page 1 or 2 in history.
No doubt about it. It's
current and future, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of time, we've just come from, since the beginning of our recorded time.
But we can't learn yet. But we're so smart.
I think we're clever. I think we're very clever. And some of us are
well, did a smart person tell us that?
And a talent for persuasion. Charismatic individuals seem to be able to allure the masses, and I don't even have to drop any names. I'm sure the rest of our audience here can figure out what I'm talking about. They're
like what? I will quote Socrates. All I know is I know nothing. And I might be 100% correct about that. I do know that I'm a big fan of the recent release about another attribution to they're looking further, deeper into space and looking at the physical properties of the universe, and all they can see is just the same math that they see right here, making honeycombs, sunflowers, you, me, everything else that's ever lived or will not live yet or will live. It's the same math. It's the same proportions, same mathematical equation that built the pyramids, designed everything, including the structural knowledge of supports, columns, and arches in Greek and Roman times. The same mathematical equation exists right in front of your eyes as it does as far deep into the universe as we can see. And we started peering microscopically. We got down to the cells, watching embryos where the egg splits for the first time. It's making the same shapes, the same patterns. It's the same mathematical proportion. It's part of sacred math, Tim, as you know. And it sounds so boring to hear people talk about it because everyone says, I know, but the truth is it's boring because people really don't understand why they even call it sacred or divine math. And I'm really not going to tear into it this week, but it's really important stuff. And these are the reasons why when we go through our basic education systems, we're taught the 5 Platonic shapes, the 5 Platonic geometric physical shapes of things, the square, the circle, the importance of the 4-sided triangle, why we're taught math, why we're taught history. If kids only knew the importance and the reasons why they're taught all of these things, it might make learning a whole lot more interesting, because there's a lot of amazing things that people had figured out generations ago, and they dedicated their lives and work to it to sum it all up into a shorter learning, so you might not have to spend your whole life trying to figure it out on your own. So
well, I'll tell you this. I didn't have any interest in math until I learned what an algorithm was and how cool of a poster it would make on my wall to look at after,
Well, that's it right there, Tim. But why does it catch your eye so well? Because you're seeing a divine shape. You're seeing it. You can't help it. It's actually even the shape of your eye. It's that eyeball shape, the almond shape, the Vischia piscis is known. It's all comes from there. There's 6 points. It goes on and on and on. And it's too bad a lot of secret societies practice this sort of thing. And I'm going to use that kind of loosely because although they might hold a lot of the same principles for studies, it doesn't necessarily mean they're believing in the direct math part. So what I'm just merely suggesting with this most recent scientific release on the properties of the universe is that no matter how far they look out or no matter how small they look in, it's the same math for us, for everything that we really know. We can't find anything otherwise. We find nothing created that does not fit this mathematical proportion.
Well, you know what you just made me think of? A book that you turned me on to.
And it's proportionately called phi for the record, not pi. Not to be confused with pi, which is also quite important. but it's like the little cousin to the word PHI, phi. You come from phi.
What you had just said before made me think about something. A book that you recommended to me a long time ago, The Kabbalion.
Oh yes.
Written by the three initiates.
Yeah.
And some of the 7 principles, one of them being, so above as above, so below. Hello?
Yeah, above, so below.
Sorry, my audio's going in and out. But
it's all right. I didn't even announce. I'm sorry, Tim. Tim and I are both. It was a strange set of circumstances this week. Nonetheless, we had to consider even getting a show going today. And luckily, we figured we would go for it. And I'm outside of my normal condition studio, and Tim has joined me primarily because he's a good friend, and I don't mean that in any disrespect to Dave, who we gave the night off to because we did not have a guest, and it's Super Bowl week, and Tim and I we're really not big football guys, so it's we thought we'd get back on, would take this opportunity again to catch up on just a lot of the latest news and a lot of interesting theories, man. Again, I just want to touch back before we drift way off of it, going to the second hour, Tim. That ball lightning,
Sure.
that is really wild stuff because, it's been recorded, it's been reported pretty much in every country going back as far as we can go. But,
so Greek times, right?
But a lot of the majority of the earlier reports were also very identical to what we would call a UFO encounter today. And I really am pulling that right off of the Live Science posting. And it just blows my mind because these are the same stories. Say people would go to, if seeing a ball of lightning, see, I haven't seen ball lightning. If I have, it was not. I didn't think it was going to kill me like a lightning bolt would. If I saw a lightning bolt strike down, first you jump right out of your skin, but your hair is standing up on your arms and your legs, and you could really feel that lightning just struck by. But these people don't talk about anything like that at all. They're just saying like it's a really weird light.
I've seen your videos, Joe, and even if some of it could be explained by that
yeah,
stuff,
what if something like that?
Well,
what if,
I think some of them, maybe
that would be amazing. Like I really mean it like that. That would be amazing. How incredible would that be? Because what in God's name would be making all of that ball lightning?
Well,
that would be really, really cool.
The ball lightning also, from what I understand, there's some form of thunder along with it. Am I right about that? That's just, I'm just going back to what I read. But there's
Tim, I don't recall
a crack in the sky, some kind of loud thud that people claim to have heard. Hey, I've never witnessed it, so
right. But I would imagine, would we hear that inside the fuselage of an aircraft? How wild would that be?
Yeah.
See, I would start to consider this thing highly dangerous and say, hey, this thing's in the plane. If this thing makes one of those cracks, we're at it. We're gone.
Sure.
I certainly wouldn't sit in fascination as it crossed through the cockpit. But I wasn't there. It might have just been awe-inspiring because it really sounds pretty cool. It really does.
Well, in terms of it describing the UFO phenomena, or the orb.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said it's...
That you've caught on film. I don't believe that's what it is. My gut tells me that it isn't that, because take, for instance, the video that you shot, and I've mentioned it before, of that red orb.
Yeah.
I don't see how any kind of ball lightning could maneuver that way as fast as it did.
Right.
In the water. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I know.
It just doesn't make sense.
There's a few times I agree. Throwing that on in hopes of just saying, hey, you, I'll just waste my life. But you know, Tim, you remember last week I had mentioned about how people a long time ago were, at least the way the Bible writes it in the book of Numbers, people lived a long time. Mm-hmm. Up until the time of Abraham, when it said that we now max out at 120 years. That's man's limit. And before that, people were living a long time. Going back to Adam, who lived about 900 years, just an estimate, just ballparking it. But it was Methuselah who lived 965 years. But, successively, they each diminished in years, as you know. We've discussed this in great lengths, you and I. I'm not gonna throw it all out there, Tim, but Tim and I had discussed these theories going back a long time now, and there was a lot of scientific research done into how this could be possible. How could people have lived 200 years, 300 years? And should it be taken metaphorically when it's spoken of in the Bible? Should it just try to be an enhancement for greatness? But then we started finding it in historical records as well, in Egypt and in Sumerian text and in the cuneiform text. And we know a lot of the names could be associated between certain civilizations, but irregardless, people were living a very long time, and it seemed to be documented with great importance. It wasn't part of a silly story. It was part of their sacred lineage, per se. It was their family heritage, their king's list. And it always seems to be. And, at the time when Adam was around, people where Adam specifically was living 900 years. And then 25 generations later, we're at Abraham, living 120 years steadily. But how is it that each generation could successively, average, drop 40, 50 years per generation in lifespan?
Well, I would say that this is another thing that we could tie to looking into genetics as a way of finding an answer. Our chromosomes and our DNA is really deteriorating. There's breaks in the human genome that are never going to be repaired. So maybe back then they had stronger chromosomes. Maybe they're over time our genetics just seem to deteriorate, and maybe this is just our form. It's a form of evolution.
It could be. Tim and I, we were studying a lot of the Icelandic ice sheet reports and atmospheric reports, NOAA reports and oceanic reports and core sample reports from all over the earth. And what's very interesting is that there's a lot of confusion. And just like everywhere else in history, there is a strong suggestion that to answer for why certain things were certain ways, they're kind of people kind of just more or less go with the best sounding answer as opposed to the undoubted correct one. And it happens because it's rarely argued. People usually take the word for it, or really just don't care too much about it. But here's what I can tell you. Today's atmospheric pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch. So imagine you're at a gas station and they have a very large, giant air tank that they run all of their air pressure hoses with, and you went in and you were able to get inside of this huge air tank, and you turn it on, and the thing starts building with air pressure, and you'd probably start hear it coming out of the hoses at that point. When that tank gets to 14.7 pounds per square inch, that is equal to when you're walking outside in everyday earth. But now, a great number of years ago, and I maybe shouldn't even go that far. What had happened was, going back as far as Celsius is, there's been a large fluctuation in atmospheric pressures. We get this from all the samples, core samples, ice samples, and plenty of other proper articles that have been posted. What we get into, Tim, and before I really drag it all out, is I'll get to some of the cool stuff first. Is what the proper suggestion is, in my opinion, is we had a problem with that pressure. And more or less, let me correct myself. We have a large problem with the air pressure on Earth right now. Not so much then. And I will try to persuade with my argument. Tim, if you'll play the bad cop for a moment, I'm going to suggest for a moment here that when I'm told, Joe, doubling the air pressure wouldn't be so good, it would be like diving, right?
Right.
And I say a pressure on myself, and we know at a certain depth I would crush like a stubborn in particular depth, any other containment for that matter. But my problem, I completely disagree. I'm going with science saying that about 10,000 years ago, we were at 31%. We were at 31% atmospheric pressure, pounds per square inch. That would have put, I would have been a lot taller. I would have been much more fit and in much better shape and better conditioning. I most likely would have been somewhere between 12 to 15 feet tall. I probably would have lived several hundred years long. These are published medical by doctors in the medical field on what my condition would be had I been living in this atmospheric condition. And I would be able to run several hundred miles before I started to feel fatigued, which is, it blows Jason Bourne right out of the water all day. I'm killing Jason Bourne right there. You know what? Here's where that all comes from, and it's okay, we have some of our top athletes in the world. They're subjected to injury. They become injured, and it's not really like because, as we say as commoners, they heal faster because they have the money. Well, that's exactly right, because they have the money to pay for what some people mock, but it's they go into a hyperbaric chamber. And I don't mean an iron lung that Michael Jackson had to hang out in, but I mean a hyperbaric chamber as in a weird little capsule that surely does appear to be claustrophobic in every variation. However, when you go to a particular doctor who offers hyperbaric treatments, it's pretty cool because you go in 1 hour sessions, and what they do is they raise the pressure in there. And what that actually does is it brings you closer to the atmospheric pressure of 31% that I'm suggesting. But when you're in this atmospheric chamber, it increases. Basically, you get double the oxygen, and they try to do 50% of the pressure plus 50%. And what that actually does is it forces all of your red blood cells and all the little cells in your body. It forces them into a much tinier little package, but with twice the amount of oxygen. So now these little red blood cells are getting into little tiny parts of your body they couldn't reach before. And not only are they getting there, they're delivering twice the action of oxygen, which is our body's cure-all. And we know it's a cure-all for us, but there's just not enough of it. And it's really, in my opinion, because of the atmospheric pressure. If we had the atmospheric pressure that we did approximately 10,500 BC, not only would we have better living conditions, but we would have better breathing conditions. There would be twice the amount of oxygen per square inch as well. So we would really be healthy. And so a lot of these recent releases are really hitting base with me in regards to the hyperbaric chambers and the difference in atmospheric pressures. And we talked a lot of time going back some time now, Tim. And
well, let me ask you this. I mean, I've heard. Well, I've actually read and heard. Number one, that it's expensive, and
no doubt.
As you said, a lot of people would mock it because at this point, I know that there's people who say it's good for autism and the Alzheimer's, HIV, and a whole laundry.
There are doctors. There are plenty of doctors who swear a 1 hour session a day in a hyperbaric chamber is a cure-all for autism.
It's interesting.
They have entire medical facilities based just on this hyperbaric treatment for autism patients. I happened to watch an entire program where a mother was successful in her treatments with cancer, being able to deliver medications and oxygen in such tiny packages throughout her body that she had a daughter who became what they realized was autistic, and she was so young, but they actually got a larger chamber. The mother still had to lay down in there, but it was large enough that the baby could lie down in there with her. And so they were doing their treatment together. And it was the documentary my wife and I watched. That young baby was then 10 years old, and was just what a remarkable story it was. Is all I have to say, because I can't say that the child didn't have the astonishing the child. It was just that this child would not have had these capabilities if not you doing this treatment. But the people who do this treatment, they're not going to argue with you. Tim, we're going to have to take a break. As you know, folks, thanks for being with us, and we're glad you joined us after the Super Bowl. And we'll talk to you in just a few moments. Good evening, good day, everyone. This is Joe Kiernan. Welcome back to Researchers on a Mission Radio here at freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio. Tonight, you're fantastically joined by me and Tim C., regular producer of the program. He is my guest tonight, whether he knows it or not. He's my guest, and we're making the best of it, I think, right, Tim?
Hey, we're trying.
And I mean that in the most compilatory way, of course. Tim, before we get back into it, and I really want to get a few key points in because I just made a couple big claims that might sound a little radical. But before we get into it, folks, I'd like to remind everyone that we are the world's largest listener-supported radio. And sorry, folks. I should mention that we are on the fly broadcasting from unusual circumstances. Folks, if you could find your way to freedomslips.com, I'd like to encourage everyone to make your way into the chat room. You'll find a lot of wonderful people with great, fantastic conversations. The shows you find, there's always two studios going, Studio A, Studio B. There's a schedule you can find right there on the homepage. There's shows that cover all topics, fantastic phenomenon, historical shows, political shows, theorem shows. Basically, you could get all the information on really what you need to know in your daily life that you can't get on your local affiliated TV stations. I recommend you don't even watch those news programs either, unless you want to keep gambling on your weatherman anyway. Folks, you will also find a donation button, which I encourage you to use. This is the greatest button on the page, whether you know it or not. If you enjoy a program, throw a few dollars in a hat. It'll make you feel a lot better. The contribution is well accepted. And I really mean it that way. It's a contribution. It's continuously used to broaden the availability of listeners. We like to enlarge the circle of listeners and try to get these messages out to as many different markets and areas as we can. The station is also involved in FM stations and currently growing at all times. We're on Live 365. TuneIn Radio. Of course, you could just go to freedomslips.com and you could just select Studio A, Studio B, and we'd love to have you. So please come on in and join the chat room, and you could have live interaction with your shows, and you could ask questions, and you could chat with others, and you could debate me on revolutionary radical ideas that I'm about to propose right now. So, with that said, my man Tim, I was trying to mention the speculation about the double in atmospheric and oxygen pressures, roughly 10,500 BC. Coincidentally, when weird things happen, so many unexplained things on Earth, the disappearance of 95% of land mammals in North America alone, coincidentally, same time. It's interesting, all right? It's quite interesting, but it boils down to how could I make such claims, and I know it's ridiculous, but here's the deal. If I was going to talk about the ice claims, the ice cores, what is going on is they go back 2, 3, 4,000 years, and then the ice, the layers of ice are so so compressed that they're counting each layer by layer, but then when they get down to a certain point, the layers are so compressed they now start saying that is 10,000 years instead of 1 year because it's been compressed by time. But what it actually is it's just has twice the amount of oxygen and atmospheric pressure. And I'm behind these scientists pushing these ice core proposals because it definitely it correlates with what they're finding in just regular ocean samples. And in 1980 they found what's known it's a hammer, and it was found inside a rock. Like it was a fossil, and it was analyzed by Battelle Laboratories, a highly notable, very notable laboratory in Columbus, Ohio. And this is the same laboratory that analyzes all moonstones that we've all extraterrestrial stones. Okay. Now, when they analyzed the hammer, when they removed it from the rock, because it was somehow in solid stone. Now, when they analyzed it, the element analysis showed it to be 96.5% iron. All right, which is incredible. Okay. Now we know that was possible because sometimes they used meteorites.
Okay.
They were able to get fine iron because this is 96.5%. But now,
Fair enough.
About 1% was sulfur, and the rest was 2.5% chlorine. Now that's interesting because physicists will tell you under today's atmospheric conditions, you cannot combine the compound of chlorine with metallic iron. It won't work. Yet here it is. It's in its solid structure. Somehow it was made. In order for us to do it today, we would have to build a chamber doubling our atmospheric conditions, start a fire and get it to over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and work a piece of meteorite into a hammer and throw in chlorine.
I think the fact that you said that it could be a meteorite may explain that, because let's just say other places in the universe there are other pressure systems, and perhaps it was formed
fair
in
enough.
another. You understand?
Fair enough, because I can't rule out that there's somewhere with twice the amount of oxygen.
Right.
All right. Fair enough. However, it's definitely been added to the compound during the manufacturing. So they know it's only been introduced into the iron under these conditions. So if I was basing everything on that, it would be foolish. And which leads me to the further that were done. So if this were the case, they said, let's apply it to dinosaurs. Well, if that were the case, dinosaurs could have lived a very long time. But now, that would also make a very long time ago, not so long ago. Because again, we're reading geological layers that we have to now know under greater atmospheric pressure are more condensed layers. So when they say this geologic period was 200 million years, it really might have only been 200,000 years. That is the suggestion at hand. So with the dinosaurs, they said, well, this does make a lot of sense, because there are certain dinosaurs that we know of with their necks are so long that under today's physical properties of our atmosphere, they wouldn't be able to circulate blood up to their head. So this is why animals like the brontosaurus, there's the long debate whether they lived in water or not. Now, if they lived in water, folks, they would have an opportunity to have water go to their head, but they would have to dive to a great depth, like maybe a large whale does, in order to drive rich oxygenated blood to their head. But now we also know brontosauruses, well, we don't know, but they also speculate brontosauruses were not swimming and diving. So therefore, if they weren't continuously swimming and diving, I don't know how they were getting blood to their head.
Well, maybe that has something to do with the size of their brain. The fact that there's very little blood getting to the brain.
It's very possible. You know,
I mean, I'm just
pulling
that out of thin air.
Yeah, no. There's just a few dinosaurs that were just. They really can't explain the physical properties on how it could be done, but that's okay. There could be other reasons, you know. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to try to control this a little bit, and see if they built a chamber mimicking these same conditions. Here's what they were finding. They were finding that globally we would have had a fairly moderate climate, probably somewhere around 75, 78 degrees, kind of arid skies, a lot of moisture in the air. This would have been because of the doubling of pressure. We also would not have had rain. Everything would have been fed through a mist, and this also is what correlated to the western part of the United States, where we have the giant sequoias and redwoods. These are ancient trees that have been around since those days that are still gigantic. And we still don't understand how they got so gigantic. And they're babies compared to what their parents were. But nonetheless, these trees are so large, they're actually an ecological environment all to themselves. But they consume 90% of the water through the morning dew. There's a rich, a heavy misty cloud every morning that comes in off the ocean. And all of the ancient trees that we know of were gigantic. We have the ancient kauri trees in New Zealand that we only know of because somehow they all got buried in mud, and they're 50,000 years old. But they're pulling these things out of the ground today, and these things are huge, man, huge and old. And boy, let me tell you, they are expensive. You could get furniture from it. You could really get anything you want made from it. But I mean, these trees are gigantic, and nonetheless, a long time ago, trees were huge. Dinosaurs were huge. Now, also in these conditions, it might have been necessary to have some sort of a reptilian-ish kind of skin, with the moderate climate and the rich atmosphere and high moisture. It's quite possible. Now, that will also bring me back to, they wanted to control this. And Tim and I had looked into this a great deal, and we really spent some time reviewing this gentleman's work. What they wanted to do was they wanted to build a chamber large enough to mimic these conditions under scientific stabilized events and properly studied. And this was the work of Japanese physicist Dr. Mori, and what he wanted to do was mimic this ecology. And he wanted to, in his own words, Tim, he wanted to mimic a small ecology the way it was before it was changed by the cosmic catastrophic known as the Great Flood. Because what Dr. Mori was suggesting was that there was some sort of water above, right, Tim? You know, correct, as the firmament. Right. He was suggesting there wasn't just the oceans and the lakes and the seas. There was water above, as it says in the Bible. God created the firmament and separated the water above and below. And what Dr. Mori was suggesting was under a cosmic event, these great columns collapsed and caused the Great Flood. So he built a chamber, and it was an enormous chamber, over 80 feet long. And he put in the exact duplicates on what they were, because what they were doing, Tim, they were also finding ice from back then and melting it in a vacuum and extracting the oxygens, everything that was released from the ice. And they were able to measure it and get even the carbon dioxide levels, try to mimic it the best way they could. And they were also filtering the ultraviolet lights as if a firmament would. And he did what any basic scientist does in step one before the science fair is he grew tomato plants. And son of a gun, he grew some of the healthiest darn tomatoes that's ever been on earth. And not only were they healthy tomatoes, they were very healthy tomatoes. They were, yes, they were huge. They were of perfect proportion. You know, each one of them was like a perfectly formed tomato that was full of the greatest enrichments, and it was just the levels for its nutrients were off the charts, as they said. So when he grew these tomato plants, after 2 years, now, mind you, I said this tomato, let's just talk about tomato plant number one. 2 years into this tomato plant, it was already spitting out tomatoes like crazy. So this tomato plant is alive 2 years now, as opposed to 5 or 6 months normal tomato plant.
Right.
2 years in, the plant was 16 feet tall, and it had 900 tomatoes on it. After 6 years in this chamber, 6 years this tomato plant is still rocking. The same tomato plant is over 30 feet tall and was producing 5,000 tomatoes, all of excellent quality.
What about the molecular? Let's not say molecular, but structurally, did it alter the plant itself? You know, on a smaller scale.
No, as a matter of fact, what they found out through the different series of the tests were hybrids weren't faring so well. He was also trying to prove what seeds are the root seeds when growing these tomato plants, which ones are, these other tomatoes really came from this one. He was basically trying to put in the DNA into it, but he didn't even want to touch on the DNA under the conditions, and I understand why. It really opens a door. We're going back to time. People are gonna have a hard time understanding what time really would be. But now these tomato plants, it wasn't it, because we know in Peru, they took a few piranha, which grow to be 6 to 8 inches long, and they put them in same atmospheric conditions in an oceanic situation. So obviously they're fish. They're living in water, but as if the Earth was the way suggested 10,500 BC. And 2 years in, the piranha were 2 feet long and healthy as can be.
That's pretty scary. Actually.
They were 2 feet long. I know it's crazy, but the only thing that they did to them was put them in the proper suggested atmospheric pressure, the same pressure that you get relief from when you go see a doctor in a hyperbaric chamber. It's the same pressure. They're growing fantastic plants. Fishes are healthier. These are treating diseases, and people swear by getting their weekly visits, and they go in there and they read a book, and they say they get so much more out of it. There
Well,
are
to bring us back, real
you
quick.
could buy these for your house. They sell these. People buy them.
You-
People build them, for God's sake.
You're
which is scary.
suggesting, Joe, what you're suggesting is that this is a potential theory. This is a theory as to why people lived long.
Right. It's many theories. Yeah.
Right. And so I completely understand where you're going with that. For our listeners to touch back where we
And we should mention
How we
that
got
none
to-
of these theories are really ours. There, a lot of different people are coming together and suggesting an idea that when we're looking back in time at the history of, we're not considering atmospheric pressure. We're looking at it as if the pressure were the same today. And we also know it wasn't the same. So when we're looking back in timestamps on Earth, we're not considering the atmospheric pressures along the way that could have manipulated, like certain stones, limestone, for instance. It wouldn't take very long at all to form limestone. A large wall of limestone could only take decades under the right conditions, where we see it as thousands of years. Same with sandstone, it's the atmospheric conditions. Now, with these stones mentioned, these are also stones we're using in the Great Pyramid and such, and if the atmospheric conditions were at this level, and people and animals healths were at a different level, it's also suggested that for the average 150-pound person, with these equations, of course, picking up a granite stone, it would be like a 150-pound man lifting a 400-pound rock with ease, in relative proportions, of course, because if the atmospheric pressure was different, technically that rock is a little bit lighter, and atmospheric conditions would enhance your proportions. Therefore, the degree of physics changes drastically, as we already know. And so really what it boils down to is, Tim's right. These really aren't our claims, but one must look at the fact that when considering the atmospheric pressures through the years, it's clear indicators and markers have been left that many will debate should really be considered when we're looking at how long ago certain things really were. And there's really markers everywhere. And it's not new information. These are
WHO in the chat room just wrote, atmospheric pressure has effect on how life develops with what you're talking about. The lower the pressure allows for the plasma of the atoms to expand, and it changes the characteristics of the atom within a range.
Thank you very much. Well said.
Yeah, thank you.
That's absolutely correct. I agree 100%. And it really does, it changes everything. And so now this is another far-fetched claim, and it's really not even part of it, but this is what a lot of people are arguing about when we say, how could these people in high offices be so defiant on global warming? It's because there's a few people out there that believe we're not in a global warming, we're in a pressure changing situation. And so if you say, what does that mean? Well, it's already been suggested that things were a lot better under these conditions. As we know, in 10,500 BC, when these pressures started to change, we lost 95% of all large land mammals pretty much overnight. The larger animals could not under new pressure conditions, were not able to get enough oxygen in their breaths of air. The larger animals, even if they were here today, when they inhale, they will never be able to get as much oxygen as they really needed. If maybe twice the pressure, or possibly a little more, yeah, they would be able to get that oxygen, but not today. And so these are the same arguments I'll propose if they do try to recreate a woolly mammoth, and they get going. There's that possibility that it just won't be able to. It might not be able to get enough air. These are things we'll find out.
But an argument could stand that if they did try to clone, I guess what you're referring to is cloning woolly mammoth on some level. Am I right about that?
Yeah. There's been several attempts to extract DNA from woolly mammoths. Right. And I know just most recently they really did find a fresh woolly mammoth that was still in the permafrost. And it's actually a really, really good find. Like, it just happened to be still completely frozen, but it also was one of the best examples of one. It was just really intact.
What I'm saying is, put it to you this way: the seeds they used for that tomato plant in that chamber, those seeds were basically made outside of that atmospheric pressure. So in our normal atmospheric pressure. So what's to say that on the same level, if they're cloning the DNA, they're using the DNA of the woolly mammoth and bringing it to life. What's to say?
Well, you have a good point. Let's just say it could. Say it could breathe. All right. It would be. I still think it would need more oxygen. Only because I honestly think it was designed that way. It's like the way I see it is we have. There's a famous cyclist. I'll put it this way: there's a famous cyclist, bicycle guy, who used to train in the Rocky Mountains, higher in altitude than Denver. He used to do all his training up there, and it would mimic like the Tour de France. We're hitting the high peaks, and he was one of the first people to bring this down, and they put it into classify it as a drug. What he was doing was he was training at these high altitudes where the pressure was greater, right? And he was withdrawing blood from himself. And when he was getting down to, let's just say, a bicycle race at sea level, he was then injecting his own blood back into himself, but this blood was packed with oxygen. And so he was cheating because you now have what the Cycle Association and now the Olympic Committee agree to. You have a giant advantage, and that's unfair. You're not allowed to inject your own blood into yourself, which is incredible, but that's where it comes from. When people are training at high altitudes, it's an excellent trick. And the thing is, it's not a trick. We've known this. We know the properties of pressure. And one of my fears is we may possibly be in a problem with our air pressures. And a lot of people know about HAARP and what they do to our atmosphere, how they actually put out sonic waves of some sort, and it actually bubbles out our atmosphere and they say causes a change in our atmospheric conditions and pressure. And, after learning a lot of these things, one has to consider, is HAARP bad, or are they really keeping this place going?
I saw a conspiracy theory show. I don't remember which one, but it had a good piece on HAARP. And they located, I believe it was in Alaska, a lot of land where they have this series of antennae-like structures, and apparently it's their claim was that it's an experimentation in order for the government to change, basically to use the weather as a weapon in the event of a war.
Well, I hear that too, but again, who's saying it though?
Right. Well, that's my point. That's why I was very clear about it being a conspiracy.
It's like, I know you had mentioned something to me about it, but not like someone else did. I'm going to mention someone else. We mentioned the Georgia Guidestones. I don't mean to go off topic. Mm-hmm. Someone told me these look at this is pure evil. The only people who do something like this are controllers who just want to rule by power. And I said, that might be so, but why would they build a nice little monument discreetly and anonymously and really make it really nice? It's really nice. It's not, I don't see anything depicting control except for this person's interpretation, because the way I read it, I said, you know what? If everything was this way, it might work around here. Unfortunately, it says we need 500 million people on Earth, and unfortunately, we passed that a long time ago. But and I could understand someone say, they want to control us by fear. But if you look at that and you say, well, you know what, that really might be ancient wisdom right there, because it's about living with Earth and not so much on Earth. Humans are not so special. We think we are, but there's something bigger going on that we're a part of. And unfortunately, our reason has made us think we're above that. And the smarter we think we are, the farther we are from being a part of it. So I would encourage people to look at the Georgia Guidestones in a different point of view. And I assure you, soon enough, I will explain to you on why those are there and what those really mean and who put them there, and a few other places, including the Kensington Runestone, the Tower, Rhode Island. I would love to explain Oak Island, but I have a feeling those guys with that TV show might do a good job at that on their own. But Oak Island, discovering this possible thing, following the Sephiroth map and the clues hidden in Shakespeare's work. Now you're talking my language. They're barking right up the tree. Dr. Elizabeth Garner and I have been working on with the hidden codes in arts. Renaissance arts is no different than Renaissance writing or Renaissance opera or classical music. Just so everyone knows again, how come they're so appealing to our ear, eyes? They are written and prepared following a mathematical proportion. It's called phi. Check it out. PHI. It's everything. So, Tim, back to atmospheric conditions.
Okay. Hey, look, I love hearing you go off on your tangents.
I gotta throw it in.
You always do tie back one way or another.
Someone really barked up my tree about it.
I love it.
And it's just too bad. I wish people would really do their own research and look into things for yourself, because if you're not looking into it yourself, folks, you're really just repeating something someone else said, and people say the damnedest things, I assure you. I assure you. So, man, let me tell you something. With putting oxygen levels in atmospheric conditions at just doubling, just a double the conditions, the same conditions you would get at your doctor's office acquiring these therapies. It changes your blood, but it changes everything. Now, it wasn't suggesting animals were larger. They were, yeah, absolutely, and the conditions encouraged it. It really doesn't show signs. It's also suggesting that most diseases wouldn't have been able to strive under these atmospheric conditions. So what the doctor was also suggesting is, if our atmospheric pressure continues to drop, we will have an increase in diseases, where he's finding the higher the pressure, the less disease, in regards to parasites, of course, on the molecular level, their multiplication and their growth alone. And this is why we're also able to find little parasites in Antarctic ice from 50,000 years ago, and when we thaw out the ice, they're still going, because they will keep going. Those suckers will always keep going. Science has shown that to us. It's possible they've even traveled here on a meteor or comet, and what initiated life, people will even argue. And we're also showing that under proper atmospheric conditions, these things will just come back to life and start multiplying right away. That's just what they do. But in these atmospheric conditions, we would not have had that. It would have been virtually non-existent as far as they can tell, but we really won't know. We really won't know. Some people are suggesting these atmospheric conditions. I should also mention, and I don't mean to cut you off, that these atmospheric conditions will be the atmospheric conditions in the biodome on Mars. So I would be very interested to see how those studies go.
That's very interesting. WHO, once again, he wrote something in the chat room. He actually wrote this a couple minutes ago, but this pertains to what you were just touching on. That he doesn't think that was the problem pertaining to what I was talking about earlier. But he says there are a lot of new diseases that come with pressure change. If animals can adapt and overcome the diseases, they die off.
I don't know if we're so much adapting, but we could. It might not me. They're suggesting it's not so much that we're adapting; it's that we're surviving.
Well, what he was also saying is the body uses vacuum conditions to produce its materials for the body, and if pressures are changed, the functions go awry, and you get cancer and other diseases.
Oh, I'm sorry. I stand mistaken. Well said again.
Yeah.
Touche. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's all a pressure. He's right with the vacuum. It's pressure conditions are everything. And I would really just like to see more consideration into the studies of the pressure changes throughout Earth's time, especially looking historically, because these people that are working on these methods, they can't address everything as of yet, but it sure would be nice to really, let's take a look at the fossil records. How long ago really were these things happening? Because he was also throwing in the suggestion that the Grand Canyons could not have been 500 million years ago. And I'll be damned. Just this week, this study released that said it could have been carved out as early as 30 million years ago. And I find that really compelling, because the argument has been the other way for my whole life. And, well, I've also heard Paul Bunyan, too. So I can't, I don't want to take anything away from the Blue Ox, man. But, all joking aside, they hold a lot of really good points about these pressure changes. And, I actually have had the benefit of speaking to someone, a woman who's in her 60s, who is having arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, I believe it's called specifically, in her hands. And they were becoming very troublesome, and they were more or less controlling her day. When you say, how are you today? It really depended how her hands were, really, She thought it was a bit strange, Michael Jackson was in an iron lung, no one wants to be in one of those things. And I said, hey, that's so funny. I can understand. I know where you're coming from. I heard this too, because there is a doctor around here who now does these things, right? It's like a heliotherapy place.
Right.
And so this lady wanted to give it a shot because they had this new chamber that people could go in, and instead of laying down in this tiny little capsule, you actually like go and you sit in this little room. It's just like a tiny little room with a low ceiling, and it's incredible. They have a TV in there and everything. You just go in for your hour. You're sealed in the room, but you sit on a little couch and you have a TV, and you're just in that room for an hour. And she's about 6 months in, and she said she really only has like 1 or 2 bad days a week, as opposed to 5 or 6. And but she seems really enthusiastic about it. She swears it's helpful. She actually told me she was considering purchasing one for her home, but they're like $20,000.
Well, what about people with sinus issues?
You know, I don't know, but these are the exact reasons I would love to encourage it. But I don't know why it's not overlooked. A lot of children these days are doing a lot of experiments under these conditions, because with modern day compressors, a lot of dads have air compressors at their houses, and it's really not that difficult. People mimic these things and they do experiments, and it's pretty cool what you can do with things. I saw children were growing roots for plants, where one root stalk might produce like 20 or 30 little hairs, and they had like 300-400 little hairs growing all over them, which would just mean they would just be drawing in more nutrients the taller it got, So it was just, it seemed like every area of studies introduced into these chambers, it seems very intriguing to me. And I wish to see it applied more often in future studies. It's not all about that hammer that was found, but it is. It is at the same time. But I should also mention, we would have also been a little bit smarter. If we would have been living, it's not like we would be getting treatment in these conditions. We would have come from a genetic line of these conditions and parents of, and grew up to these. The plants you ate were healthier, or if we were meat eaters, that was healthier.
So our potential, genes would have just gotten better over time.
Exactly.
Rather than, well.
Exactly. It's just everything would. It's suggesting everything would have been better in all consumptions, and it's quite interesting, because the same gentleman was saying that when the atmospheric changes happened, a great body of water in North America came down, and that's what carved out the Arches National Park in Utah and the Grand Canyon. And I said, wow, this guy, he's like bringing the Grand Canyon too close to today's timeline. So, he did make a few accusations, in my opinion, that might be stretching it in the timeline, but in theory, he might be right. We just don't know, is what it boils down to. Well, ironically, I think that's what he's hoping for, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool that even with the artichokes, they grew artichokes, and I know why, but they're just a nice growth plant, for consumption. It's a good turnover, and they were just in full growth and just rapid succession. Like, it would just be a continuous food, really. And it's just it goes back to the Book of Numbers again, Tim, that this doctor and as many other geoscientists and astrophysicists, and no matter where department we go to, a cataclysmic event happened approximately 10,500 BC. It appears it was some sort of a comet strike, a meteor strike, but we really don't truly have the crater, right? We have a few spots that are indicators, but we don't have that definitive crater. It's possible, as some people suggest, that it blasted the North American ice sheet, which would have been 2-3 miles thick. And if hit on an angle, it's possible. The only thing left is the Great Lakes or Hudson Bay, but if hit on an angle, I could see it kind of skipping along, but also melting the North American ice sheet all at once and flooding things out and
causing the
therefore changing pressures. But when we get back to the Book of Numbers, if something happened to that degree and the pressure started changing and we see the larger mammals dying off, and you know what? This also would account for the amount of, I want to mention before the show runs out, the amount of birds. If you people at home want to look it up, how many birds that no longer fly that we attribute to at the end of the last ice age, they developed no need for flight anymore. So there's all these birds that can't fly anymore that would be able to fly under these conditions. And history tells us, oh, this bird just figured out a way not to fly, and that's how it survived after the ice age. Well, partially, yeah, it obviously survived, but it still has the wings, and it wants to fly. It's a bird. Under these atmospheric conditions, these birds would be able to fly. And I'm talking about all these giant doofus-shaped birds like flamingos, the ostriches. There's strange birds in New Zealand. Right, there's just lots of birds. Penguins. These birds used to fly, and they still could under these conditions. With the Book of Numbers, it also shows us with the depletion of large animals, we see it in the timeline that they're writing down of these generations. They're not living long. Each one is living less and less and less. And when we correlate that with the history timeline, we're seeing that the same scale of mammals, just less and less and less and less. And I really do feel that there was a time that people lived a little longer. Noah lived hundreds of years, man. Noah lived 600 years. Nobody even understands that because it's hard to understand, but it's very easy to understand. People in the Renaissance times. Yes, peasants didn't live long because they were living in poor conditions. But if you take the average person who was able to eat proper foods, they lived a very long time. A lot of these people lived, you'd be surprised, 60 to 80 years old. You'd be really shocked. And then when we get to the Americas, circa 1850, 1800, people are only living into their 30s. And they attribute it to poor health and poor conditions. Maybe so, but it was globally. And we were just coming out of the Little Ice Age at that point. That started happening in the 1300s and was blamed for the first plague. We had the first plague in the mid to late 1300s, but that's also when the Little Ice Age began. And again, if there were changes in pressure and more diseases arose and people started living less, I would love to see the studies on the atmospheric pressures to see if this is a possibility. Because if so, then this is something I would like to focus our attention on. It seems to be quite important. If it shows such great signs to be beneficial, why am I not seeing markers, Tim, of something wrong, something negative about it?
Well, it's controversial at this point and experimental at best, really. At this point, I mean, the technology is in its infancy. Sure, they've been around for so many years, and doctors have been using them, but I think that it's going to be more. It needs more developing, the technology itself before we can really get an idea as to
Yeah.
which.
You think more more technology, more to sway the popular belief? Because I just want to get more people studying it, to be honest with you, because it just really sums up to a group of scientists worldwide, doctor scientists. This is really a decade-long study, to be honest with you, that these experiments have been done under so many different conditions. And how come I don't see more of it? How come I don't hear more of these treatments when go, talk to your doctor about it, folks. If you say, "Hey, I heard a guy on TV on the radio talking about this," let them know, and the doctor, I'm sure, will tell you the benefits of it, because it's no secret. It's for a quick recovery. It's for just general recovery and all. It's a very, very helpful, useful tool.
People are going.
It will rule out blood thinners, folks. You don't need any of that.
There's all chiropractic and think of how many of these types of services, these therapies, that 10 years ago were really just controversial and experimental, or considered archaic, that are just being brought back. Homeopathic therapies. A lot of people are finding new ways to heal themselves, rather than just go to your doctor and take a pill.
Very true. Because go homeopathic if you can. Go to the natural elements. They were healing people just fine for years. And people are very smart. And they knew what did what for a long time, and it's kind of all been lost. But I assure you, it has nothing to do with this this global push of chemicals in pills these days. I assure you, folks,
That's a whole other show.
But there's real health out there for you. It's available. Ask your doctor about this hyperbaric stuff. I know it sounds ridiculous, folks, but if you're suffering from an ailment and you're feeling crazy, ask your doctor if he thinks he or she if it would be helpful to you. And I would love to hear the results of it. But I think few doctors can argue the benefits of the treatments of these, especially for suffrage conditions of pain. A lot of the painful conditions, Tim, or again, people that need blood, need oxygen to get to parts of their body where it's not really circulating that well to. These are excellent conditions for it. And excellent tomatoes.
Go under the knife should consider all options. And the truth is, a lot of people, a lot of people are open to these types of, experimental procedures.
And one more thing, Tim, before we run out of time, why do we have to get into all of this seed manipulation and DNA structure of seeds and all of this crap, when we could just be building hyperbaric chambers with 15,000 properly grown tomatoes on them like wildfire? It makes no sense to me, which would be properly done as opposed to manipulated and controlled.
I'd much rather put that in my body than Monsanto's freaking corn and whatever they're putting in the food. No doubt about it.
I agree. I think this time we speak on this topic, it'd be the results of me building a hyperbaric chamber and growing plants in it.
All right.
We'll see what happens with that.
Good luck with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And
I have a feeling you're going to have to go further than just Home Depot to build that.
No. I'm a very resourceful person in this world. I'm one of the few that I try to live with the world as opposed to on it. There's a lot of people walking around that could really help out a lot if they only knew what they were doing here. But that'll have to be another generational talk, centuries from now. when I come out of my chamber and I live another 600 years. Till next week, folks, thank you for joining us at Researchers on a Mission Radio. From Tim C. and myself, Joe K., good night, take care. Be safe, get yourself in a hyperbaric chamber right away.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Most guys freeze. That's just a cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. The heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is mere insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger, unafraid, right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.